Hello, everyone. I'm Peter Zemsky, Strategy Professor at INSEAD. Welcome to today's exciting Tech Talk. We have a great entrepreneurial story and a great founder. So huge pleasure to welcome today's speaker. So INSEAD is blessed with many, many successful entrepreneurs, but Joanna really stands out as an innovator, as a force for good, and just a great business and social leader. Of course, she created Knix, a top 10 growth company in Canada. She's recently sold 80% to a large corporate buyer and unusually transitioned to still leading the company within that structure. Curious about how that's going. She's an author, published her first book, Life After Birth, in 2021. Finally, many, many awards. I'll only mention most recently, she got the Ernst & Young Canada Entrepreneur of the Year Award in 2023. Joanna, welcome back to INSEAD. Good to see you.
Thanks so much for having me.
That's good. We connected last time when you were here for your reunion, but this time digital. Just curious, what's kind of on your mind these days on this Wednesday? Anything keeping you awake at night?
Yeah, I joke. I have 3 young kids, so they are always keeping me awake, unfortunately. It's hard to go through a night without someone crawling into my bed. But aside from that, there's really 2 big themes that I think are top of mind for me. And the first, I don't think is unique to me at all. It's really the economy, the state of retail at the moment. So much has changed over the past couple of years. It seems like there is no consistency here right now. So that's like the first bucket that myself and my team are navigating is how do people want to shop? How do they want to spend their money as, things get tighter? And then the second piece, which is, I guess, more unique to me and what you just shared about my more recent journey is really how do I personally make this evolution from company founder to CEO and president of a larger organization? And how do I keep the good associated with being a founder and move away from some of the more negative connotations that I think can come with being a founder. And that's kind of the bigger journey that I'm on at the moment.
Fascinating. Okay, so lots that we can unpack. What I'd like to do, though, for those who aren't familiar with your story, let's go roll it from the beginning, understand how you built the company, and then definitely get into things like the future of retail and the kind of leadership transition you're on. So just to remind us, what were some of those key milestones? And I guess really at the beginning, how did you move? I mean, you at the time you came to INSEAD, you were a media executive. What led you to launch a lingerie venture?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I went to INSEAD. I had no real ambitions of being an entrepreneur or a founder, but I remember in the first week I was really taken aback by the focus on entrepreneurship and learning. I think, 60% of alumni at some point are running their own business. And it really opened my eyes to what was possible. And I'd had this idea for leak-proof underwear for a couple of years. I saw a big gap in the market, really feeling like products weren't being designed for women and for their bodies and for their needs. And a really big problem that a lot of people face that didn't have an adequate solution for. And so I spent the whole time at INSEAD working on the idea for Knix. I got almost every classmate in 12J, shout out to 12J, to help me with the projects. And I mean, there are so many stories about how the class helped me. It really is remarkable. But for me, I mean, honestly, the first big leap of faith was I won the business venture competition. And so that for me was a huge vote of confidence that other people saw that there was potential in this idea, that I had a solid plan, that I was potentially onto something. And so that was really the first kind of make or break moment. I remember going into that judging final and had basically decided if I didn't win, I wasn't going to move forward with the business. And if I know,
no pressure.
No pressure. But you know what? That had a lot to do with my family, candidly. I come from a family of doctors, lawyers, professors. Like there's just the risk appetite wasn't there in the same way. And so I needed some kind of validation. That was the first big milestone, honestly, was kind of winning that competition. And then there's been a lot of big milestones along the way. And, we've honestly evolved so much as a brand and a company. What's interesting is that our kind of mission and North Star has really remained the same. And that's this desire, which is cool, right? Like how we've sold has changed, what we're selling has changed, but really that initial concept that people deserve to be unapologetically who they were and who they are, and that the market could really benefit from not only new products, but also a brand that really celebrated and respected people for who they were, that valued diversity and inclusion. And those have kind of been the two big parts of Knix. It's, how do we make great products? And then how do we disrupt from a marketing standpoint?
Did you have a sense at the time, this was like back, I guess, in 11, 12, when you were starting to think about this, did you have a sense about the wave that was coming around inclusion and you've really, things have shifted in some ways in your favor?
Yeah, it's, I think that my background in media really served me well insofar as I've always been a storyteller. So I've always been working with creatives and talent, and whether that's film or television or musicians, who really feel like their role is to connect with people and to make them feel something. And so when I was working on Knix, it was pre-Instagram. It was before all of these big movements had taken place. But anyone I would speak to who was interested in these products would tell me, it's having an effect on my self-esteem. I see brands like Victoria's Secret. It makes me feel like I'm not good enough. I'm not beautiful enough. And, I was living it myself. I think we put an immense amount of pressure on women, put immense amount of pressure on themselves and their appearance. And it's almost at a detriment at times. And so really felt like, what would actually happen? What kind of mind space could be freed up if, instead of spending all of our time trying to adhere to a particular beauty ideal, we put that energy towards doing better in other things.
So how do you, so you're a great storyteller, what's going to be a great story. And then, but early on as an entrepreneur, it's great. You want to go for it, but now you've got to get investors to buy in, and your first employees, and then your first customers. I think you're also a Kickstarter phenomenon. So tell us a little bit about how you actually turned this idea and the vision and all that great energy into an actual venture.
Naive optimism is how I would describe it at first.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm hyper goal oriented. I just, when I feel like, Peter, the last time I saw you in person outside of our 10th reunion, of course, was me like, really determined to get on the dean's list. And I had to do it. And it was my goal. And I was very annoying about it. And so I think that I have relentless optimism, and I received a lot of positive feedback along the way from our customers and community that what I was doing was making a difference. And so that was part of the engine that kept me going. Was I could see from very, very early on, okay, these products are having a huge impact on how people live. And the way that we're speaking to people is completely transforming how they're feeling about themselves. And candidly, it was happening to me too, which is kind of interesting as well. Like, I was on this journey as well, along with our customers and community. So that kept me going, but it was hard. I mean, especially raising money and going out and convincing investors. That was very, very, very challenging for me. I think I got told no over 500 times easily. And in the early stages,
for someone who was like an overachiever, that's a lot of no.
It's a lot of no's. And as someone who used to take those things very personally, I've had to kind of work through that and really learn that collecting no's is just part of the journey to get to a yes. And but it was challenging. I think this whole idea, which I think anyone at INSEAD would understand, was rooted in the concept of blue ocean. It was creating something that completely didn't exist. There was no comparables. And that's the leak-proof underwear category that we helped pioneer and build, which is now a $1 billion category with adoption rates globally outpacing a tampon. So it really has become the most disruptive innovation within menstrual hygiene and intimate hygiene in the better part of the last 60 years. Yeah. But I'm not going to lie, Peter, it's a wild idea. People are like, I don't understand. What do I do with this? And I'm like, well, you pee and you bleed into it. And that's not an attractive thing to talk about.
No. Yeah.
So, and there was no comps to kind of market size or do anything like that. So I think people always believed in me, and they believed in, I think you're going to go really far. You've got a great plan. You're a great storyteller, but they didn't know how to think about the market.
Yeah. Yeah. So on the blue ocean side, as you said, you're creating a category. What was it like to innovate on the product, and how did you approach that? You guys got quite well known for the ability to create a category.
It was I love product. I love product innovation. It's one of my favorite things about what I get to do. In the beginning, it was fun and completely discouraging at the same time. I still have the first samples we ever made, and I keep them as keepsake because let me tell you, they were the most hideous, horrible things you've ever seen in your entire life. Like, I had the biggest hopes. I was like, this is going to be amazing. And I opened it and I was like, what are these humors from the 1920s? And no one can buy this. So it was hard. And getting suppliers to work with us was hard, and getting them to see the vision and, really kind of scratch their heads and say, you want us to do what?
I think, were they mostly men on the other side? Just curious at this time.
A lot of it, yeah, absolutely. And even if they weren't, we've come so far as a society, in most cultures, at least over the past 10 years, in terms of vulnerability, being open, sharing, kind of letting our guards down a little bit. And so at that point in time, it didn't really matter if it was men or women. It was just very taboo and kind of uncomfortable, I guess. But it was cool. It was really fun. And one of the great things about that kind of innovation is that you don't have to reinvent every part of the wheel. We take the best of what existed within the category already, and then by infusing our technology, it was something totally net new. And so that's a principle that I've always kept ever since. You don't have to change everything. You can innovate on one part, and that can create something totally brand new.
Again, as you bring up, that is a sort of a key blue ocean principle, right? You're trying to recombine existing things, not just do everything de novo. Just in terms of what kind of people did you get around the table to, suppliers, what type of suppliers, but also internally, what is it, how did you manage what I imagine was some diversity in that group?
Yeah. So, the first investor that I brought on board was actually an INSEAD grad. Her name's Catherine Frum, and she had started an intimates maternity company of her own. And so she was the first person who really believed in me and believed in Knix in that way. And just having someone who'd done this before was so helpful and great.
Oh, yeah.
So that was great. Suppliers, I built fantastic relationships, and it's amazing. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary back in June, and everyone who attended were kind of blown away by the energy in the room. And there were people who are freight forwarder we've worked with for a decade, suppliers, vendors, and I think that one thing I've done well and my team has done well is that we share our success with everyone that's helped us. Like the folks at Meta feel like they're a big part of our success in Canada. The EY folks would feel it. Shopify feels it. Our vendors feel it. And it truly is because without them, it would have been a lot harder. And so I think that made people want to help us, which is interesting.
Cool. Yeah. So you had there was almost an ecosystem play there that you were taking this whole group. You weren't doing it alone. Super interesting. Lots we could dive into. Maybe just as you scaled, right? So you really started getting traction and started having serious throughput, the category's taking off. You've got to worry about, well, you know, how much do you let go because other people are now coming. Tell us a little bit about the key challenges for you as a leader and for Knix in the scaling period.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's interesting. We've gone through so many different iterations of the company over the past 10 years. And as a leader, I think the biggest evolution I'm constantly on is when you're starting out and you're a team of 1, 2, 3 people, you have to do pretty much everything. And so I've worn every hat in this office. I've assembled the desks, you know, I've like made the products, I've done the financial modeling. And then as the business starts to grow and mature, at first you need more generalists that are also like that can wear a lot of hats with you. And then you need more specialists that are much better than you ideally. And so how do you get comfortable and also capable of identifying where your gaps are and recruiting folks that are stronger than you in certain areas? And the biggest change for us, honestly, was over COVID. So, you know, we'd been doing great as a company. We'd been growing, but when COVID started in Canada and we were locked down for a very long time, I think we were a team of 40 people. Now we're 400. And the business really grew exponentially over that time period. So, leading remotely, building community remotely, like all of those things were a challenge too.
You know, so did COVID actually allow you to grow, or was that's just where you were in your cycle?
No, I think that we had made a lot of good decisions leading into that point. So we'd raised our first round of financing, so we didn't have the same capital concerns, like real round of financing, I should say, that other folks had. I'd already gone through the pivot of selling into wholesale and then transitioning to digital. So we'd been 100% digital play for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years at that point in time. So that was great. All of our products were rooted in the concept of comfort and being comfortable in your skin. So everything we sold, people wanted, and we had the infrastructure to scale. So I think I witnessed a lot of retailers being forced to adapt their business models during COVID, and we'd already made that evolution on our own before. So we were there and ready to go.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah.
But yet then a big transition for you as a leader, as the size of the company explodes, you're doing it remotely. Did you ever question whether you could stretch and grow with this thing you created, or this was your baby and you were going to ride it out?
I mean,
daily.
Daily.
Okay.
Daily. I ask myself that question every day. Yeah, no, constantly. And I think you always have to have that humility and kind of self-awareness that, am I the right person? If I'm not, who is? You know, how do I think I add a lot of value to our team. And I think I still wear that founder hat probably more than I should, which puts me in a unique position, I guess. But I'm constantly figuring.
The founder hat is quite powerful, right? If you wear it well, right, it does give you something different from a professional CEO.
Yeah, and I probably care more. I mean, I can't say that for certain, but I can't imagine caring any more than I do, and I'm a passionate person. So, yeah. So I've been making that evolution. I ask myself that constantly. And I check in with my team a lot. I used to check in with my board before we were acquired, and I still check in with the new owners too. I always want to make sure that everyone feels like I'm still the right person in the driver's seat to build the momentum for the team and the company.
Just curious, as you went through this journey, were you sort of aware, did you feel like there were additional challenges to you as a female founder? Again, with suppliers or fundraisers, how did that play out for you, and how did you experience that?
Certainly on the financing side. And it's interesting because I've had some team members who, worked with me at Knix and have gone on and worked at other companies who've also done fundraising. And they've said, Joe, you had it so much harder. The questions were completely different. The level of diligence was like 5 times what I've seen at my current company. And so I think that a lot of investors, they like to pattern match. They do. They say that. They look for common characteristics and traits. And when women are only getting, sub 2% of venture financing the capital that's available, there just aren't as many patterns to match with. And so I think, it's important for female founders to have other role models and stories that they can look up to so that they believe in themselves when other people are not showing the same kind of fortitude. And then it's equally as important for investors to see that this can be done. So I think in the beginning, a lot of questions around, is this a lifestyle business? The category feels a little bit niche. Oh, menstruation, that feels niche. I'm like, well, over half the population. So I don't know. I don't really know if you could be any less niche, candidly.
Yeah. Did you sometimes feel like you just didn't want those investors?
Oh, I definitely didn't want those investors. And that, Catherine, who I mentioned earlier, and I know she's going to watch this, she couldn't join today, but I was kind of renowned for raising money and then parting ways at the 11th hour, because I would just get this feeling that they didn't really understand what we were trying to accomplish. And that went on for quite a while. The biggest surprise and the biggest disappointment for me was when I raised our Series B financing. So at that point, this was our first really big round of financing. It took place during COVID. We'd been growing, 100% year over year at that point in time. We were profitable. Everything was moving in the right direction.
This time I'm going to hear yes. Lots of yes.
Peter, the Cinderella story that I painted in my brain, every person's going to want to go to the ball with me. We're incredible. And my board felt the same way. We made a very kind of intentional decision. I just found out that I was pregnant with twins. I had a 1-year-old at home, so I was going to have 3 kids under 2. And I just had discovered this, and yet we still decided this was a good time to go and raise this financing round. So we all felt so confident in the business that we didn't think that was going to be a challenge. And that was the time when I went from feeling sorry for myself to feeling mad, because I continue to experience the kinds of comments and questions, remarks like, no one wants to be the last money in before she goes and has her twins. Is she going to take the money and run? Like, where am I running to with my 3 babies? Like, who's running where? No, I'm not taking the money and running. And so just this general kind of feeling that it was impossible for me to raise this family and to raise this business. And at its core, so that during that round, I did get mad, and I told our investment bankers, I said, anyone who questions my ability to be a parent and to build this company is cut from the process. I don't want to know who they are. I don't care who they are. I don't want to think about them. I don't want them taking up mental space in my brain, but I know that I don't want them anywhere near what I'm building. And so that was a scary but empowering moment for me as a founder.
Wow. So as you got in that period, you're sort of starting to get mad, and then you also become more vocal, right? So I think you start to emerge. You talked about this, and again, that article I think gets picked up and circulated a lot. Have you now, as a successful role model, how do you see your responsibility in terms of either shifting the system or helping other female entrepreneurs? Do you have time for that?
I make time for it. I can't do as much of it as I want to, but I find ways to do it in social platforms. And also I sit on a board for a really big youth entrepreneurship focused charity. I think one of the things that always stood out for me when I was building Knix, and I started in 2013, this was one of the eras, I guess I should say, of founder as rock star, like entrepreneur as rock star. You would have female founders on the cover of magazines. We would put folks like Travis from Uber on a pedestal. We were obsessed with the WeWork story. We were, all of these people that
were times when we all thought tech was always for good.
Exactly. And a lot of folks that we put on pedestals only to now tear them down. But there was this general feeling that I felt as a founder that everyone was pretending that it was all good. And the truth is that it's not all good. It's actually incredibly hard. There are bad days. There are bad years. For some companies and founders, there's bad decades. And so I was, I always found that part of the journey very isolating. And being in Canada, at least at first, I didn't have that many other entrepreneurship, like female founder friends who were on the same journey that I was. And so from the get-go, I've been pretty honest about how I've questioned myself and some of the criticism that I faced and how I overcome those things and how I'm learning as I go. I mean, we're all learning as we go, but I think that it's really struck a chord with people because there's this pressure when you're building a business to pretend that everything is great. You don't want to let on that it's hard because then investors might think that it's hard and they might not give you money. But any investor knows that it's hard too. And so I've definitely viewed that as part of my role as a founder and a female founder, is to be open and honest about what the journey's been like, ideally so that other people just don't feel as alone. And that is, it's almost like I'm doing the Knix brand ethos, but applying that female founder lens to it.
No, very, powerful storytelling. Maybe, okay, next chapter, tell us a little bit about, the decision to sell. So that's one thing, after building this business, and then also strategy, what's the strategic logic? What does the parent now bring? But then also on the personal, then after that, the personal side, guess you only sold 80%, you stay on. So anyway, tell us about this next chapter.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that I think is funny is everyone says, on the pitch decks or the business plans, ignore the slide at the end that has the logos of who's going to acquire you, right? That's sort of a comment that you hear. Well, I mean, in our case, this is a company that was a logo on my business venture competition deck.
Wow.
Which is really funny. And I thought it would happen at year 5. We ended up speaking around that time, but it wasn't the right moment for me to sell. But I got to know them very well and really appreciated the company and the organization. So when they circled back around the next time, it felt like a different moment. It was not the ideal time for me to sell. The way the timing went was I closed our $50 million Series B round on the Friday. On the Monday morning, I gave birth to my twin daughters. On the Tuesday, while I was still in hospital, I received the email from them asking if I would be interested in selling the company.
That's a lot. I mean, I'm just going to say twins is a lot. I've got 4 kids, but like one at a time. It's just, anyway.
Exactly. Still in the hospital, but I haven't even taken my 2 new babies home to my other baby. We've had this money in the bank for less than 2 business days. But you can't control timing. I really think that's a lesson I've learned along the way. And I really, really liked this organization. I liked the people. And I'd had the benefit of having spent a lot of time with them before. And so I sold to a company who is, they're called Essity. They used to be called SEA. They rebranded it several years ago. And they are the leading kind of producer of pads, tampons, diapers, paper and disposable products in most places around the world. And so what I liked about them was, I'm sure, going full circle back to the early pitches and people not understanding the concept and not really thinking it was a bit weird. This is a company that has now seen that this category is part of their future. So really, really believes in what it is that we're building, believes that there's going to be a global brand that's present, and believes that Knix can be that company. And so really felt like we shared the same vision of what this could be. Our ethos are very similar. So they talk about breaking down barriers to health and well-being. We talk about breaking down taboos. So everything is very kind of in sync. And then it felt like the right moment. I could see what was happening in the market. were starting to get a little bit uneasy. And it just felt like it would be really, really good to have a partner.
Yeah.
But the decision to keep 20% is because I was absolutely not looking to sell. And it's not like I went and did a big roadshow and I marketed to all these people, the company. I spoke to one company and negotiated a really good arrangement that I think serves both of us, which is that Knix is independent and we're doing our own thing, and I get to stay on as president, and I still am a major shareholder, but we have the kind of support and infrastructure and power of a much larger organization.
Wow, so much to follow up there. Maybe I'm curious about the global aspiration. So going into the acquisition, you were strong in sort of North America, but had not done much beyond that, right?
That's right. Yeah. Canada and the US predominantly is where our sales have been and our focus has been. And then Essity actually is strongest in pretty much every territory other than those two markets. And so a good pairing there in terms of how do you think about going global? What are the opportunities? Another interesting transition that's happened since I started Knix is when the category didn't exist, no one really knew how to think about it. Over the past few years, it's now being regulated as a medical device. And so it's actually quite complicated. We've built an apparel company that's regulated like a medical device company. And so Essity brings a lot of expertise around the regulation piece. You know, how do you navigate that? And that also is a big unlock for us as we think about going global.
Okay, so what about you? You mentioned right up front, for you, the transition from being the entrepreneur, a little bit just the hero on the pedestal, although you're trying to be realistic about it, to now part of this corporate enterprise.
Yeah. So I think it has a lot to do with who I am as a person. So I think a lot of founders dream about an exit. They start a company and they're in pursuit of an exit, and that's what they want. That was not the case for me. And, you know, I've been fortunate enough. I've gotten to know quite a few other founders. The Shopify folks Shopify's based in Canada. And so that talking a lot with them. And my real goal is to build a company and brand that lasts for generations. I want my, you know, daughter's kids to use our products and to create a brand that has lasting impact and meaning. And so what that means for me in this new chapter, you know, I've done the exit, I have the partner, and now it's all about how do we build a company that maintains its happiness and youthfulness, but that grows up a little bit. And how do I also enable that to happen where the areas that I've been really passionate about, stuff like product and marketing and storytelling, how do we create the right infrastructure internally at Knix so that that continues to exist and live on? Those are the things that I'm working on.
Very nice. I'm just gonna, for the audience, we'll go to the questions soon. So do, if you want, log some of those in. Maybe one other thing you put on the table right at the beginning we haven't talked about is, hey, what is happening in retail? And some of the dynamics in your category, but also just in channels and consumer behavior. What are you seeing? Where do you see the opportunities and the challenges?
Yeah, I think, you know, the pendulum keeps swinging in a bunch of different directions, and it's really interesting to see where things are going to net out. So, you know, even during COVID, obviously, there is this acceleration of e-commerce and people buying more goods online. Everyone thought that was going to stick and keep up. And in many ways it has, but also people do want to shop in stores and they want to have the physical kind of touch of engaging with products and getting someone to help them. And so I think that that's one area that, you know, Knix is really mindful of, but every brand is mindful of is, you know, what's the role that e-com is going to play? What's the role that that stores are going to play? What's the role that wholesale is going to play?
As you said, this is a super interesting topic for those in the audience following retail. So how, in your case, are you using physical and e-commerce? How do you see the role of each, and how do you manage that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think at its principle, we're in the process of evolving to be more of an omni-channel brand. So we started with digital. We are very much digital first. Most of our sales come from digital. We're in the process of building out our own store fleet. So we'll have 15 of our own retail locations by the end of this year. And then if you can imagine, like, how we think about the assortment. Obviously, you can have the most on digital. It's endless aisle. It's really, really easy to sell more items. As you move kind of further and further away from your own core, the merchandising assortment becomes kind of less and less. And so we're taking an omni-channel approach. We think that the customer, everything you do has to be in service of the customer. And so if they want to buy our product from a department store, they can do it. If they want to order key items on Amazon because they need it next day, we have to be able to service that. And then within our own kind of model, what's interesting is it doesn't matter if you have one store, you have 2,000 stores, the expectation from the customer is the same. Buy online, pick up in store, return to store. You have my loyalty information, my size, even though I've never walked into this physical location. And so that's where I think, with in many, many ways, there's a lot of exciting things that are happening in terms of the how retail is embracing AI and how we can use that to better support the customer journey.
Yeah. Are you seeing real value from your AI projects in terms of and in what areas?
Yeah, so I think you could bucket them into a couple of different arenas. So the first one I would call is the personalization customer journey kind of route. And so that is, how do you really understand the consumer behavior and service them with different site experiences, or even down to the models that they see based on the signals that they're telling you and in your ability to predict who they are and more about them. We do a lot with automated chat. And so that's another interesting one. So we still have a large, human customer support team, but how can you take those really simple, basic questions and leverage AI tools to automate that? Then there's a whole bucket around, the creative side of things, which is really interesting. Lots of great creative tools where you can create whole new universes without even taking a single photo, and you can, it's very cool what can happen. And it's,
personalized storytelling, these kind of things, suddenly, wow.
Exactly. And I think what's cool about it, at least for us, is you don't need a huge team to be able to do that. It's actually kind of leveling the playing field a bit. And then the same thing I would say is true of these business engine tools. So, one of the biggest, darkest sides of retail is inventory. It's there's never been bigger inventory challenges than right now. And so, how do you use some of these tools to really help with forecasting, your demand planning, your pricing, and whatnot?
How are you with these changes in the nature of retail? Do you find you're evolving the skill set, the talents inside Knix, either upskilling people, bringing new profiles in? How do you keep the company, able to get the business value out of these possibilities?
It's a great question, and it's really interesting because this is really one of the first times since I've been leading Knix. Obviously, I started the company after email and chat, and all of these things were kind of pretty pervasive in society. This is the first time where I really feel for some of these AI tools, it's every team and individual's responsibilities to figure out how to leverage it just a little bit. It can't just sit with a technology team who are kind of, directing people on what to do. Every team, creative, HR needs to use it to help with job descriptions, finance needs to use it to help with the predictive modeling. It's almost on every single individual's onus of responsibility to figure out how they can use these tools to improve their own efficiency.
You imagine what it would have been like running a company when the internet hit and having to get everyone to take it seriously. It's that kind of pervasive transformation.
Exactly. And now everybody uses the internet for research, for in your own day-to-day lives. And so I think that there's some reluctancy around adopting these tools because I think there's a lot of fear and unknown, which is rightfully so. But I also think that everyone needs to find their way of how they're gonna embrace them.
Okay, I'm gonna just shift gears and grab some of the questions that have been coming in. So I'll give you a few. Actually, one, maybe going back to the original mission, the body positivity, inclusivity. I think there's a question from Jennifer Lee here, but has it become more difficult to navigate some of the conversation and relationships with stakeholders? Do people start to have different perspectives? There's a lot of now things somehow became more complicated. I guess that may be what this is alluding to. What are you finding?
And it has. I mean, I think in the beginning it was complicated because a lot of people hadn't seen it before. And so it felt quite, I honestly almost want to use the word jarring. Like it was just so unexpected to see different bodies and different ages and different like ethnicities. I just don't think people were used to it. And so it was jarring. Now, one of the things I'm kind of most proud of at Knix, because we've really been at the forefront of this, is diversity and inclusion within marketing now has become almost table stakes. And so it's more of a statement if you aren't doing it than if you are. I think where I'm seeing companies get in trouble is where their community base doesn't necessarily associate them with those values and choices. And so, you know, an example that comes to mind is the Bud Light situation that took place in the US earlier this year, where honestly, like as simple of an initiative as sending an influencer a present turned into what almost became the cancellation of an entire like legacy brand. And so we are lucky at Knix because we've been doing this for so long that the audience that selects to follow us align with values too. It doesn't feel off-brand for us to have these conversations. I will say when we do more cold prospecting advertising, like for me, it's not a good television commercial if someone's not writing us an email and telling us that we're gross. Like that's the whole company knows it. Like our CE team is like, Joe's going to be happy about this TV commercial because people are saying that we're, you know, disgusting. But and it's not that our ads are disgusting. It's just that there's still a level of divide within America, certainly, and within Canada as well.
Great. No, thank you for a very upfront answer on that difficult topic. Very different question. Rashmi, I think asking you to reflect a little bit. So what do you think about other founders who are trying to build a brand in like a new category? So a little bit like what you confronted. If you reflect a bit on your journey, any sort of advice for what it's like, any tips for people, you know, I mean, again, it's a great opportunity to build a brand if you're in a new space. At the same time, there's a lot of complications because nobody knows what you're about. Any lessons from your journey?
Yeah, you really, so you have to invest a lot of time in storytelling and figuring out how to communicate the product and the story in a way that really breaks through with people. And so for me, I felt actually quite lucky that I'd had all those investment pitches that I sold to retail, pitched so many buyers, because by the time I was telling consumer stories directly, I sort of knew what worked and what didn't work. And you have to be very, very comfortable with the notion that you're not going to get it right. And that it takes a lot of iterations to get it right. And I think where I see so many businesses fail and founders fail is they become completely married and attached to the idea, the message, how they think the market should respond, and aren't actually willing to kind of have the openness and curiosity to pivot and adapt. So that's one thing I would say is you have to try a lot of different things, and you have to, you know, really iterate until you find what works. To take it a step back even further, what I tell every founder is if you're going to make something net new, if you're solving a problem, please let it be a big problem that affects a lot of people. I think that, Knix was successful because the underlying problems that we were solving with our products, 1 in 3 women leak, 50% of people menstruate. Like these are like big, commonly held challenges. Sometimes when I see a business, have a hard time getting off the ground is when the net new category that's being created is so specific for a small group of people that it becomes even harder to kind of get in front of those folks and test and iterate in the way that you need to eventually evolve.
Yeah, very nice. I love the test and iteration, not just on product, but also on story and messaging. That's a nice connection. Okay, I have a couple of questions, one early on from Ludovic and then just from Sebastian. I think they're asking a little bit as what were the key sort of milestones? So when did you have to, for example, change business models, or what were those, big steps in terms of channels, or just a little more about the journey and some of the key milestones that really separated eras in Knix?
Yeah, so the first kind of milestone or chapter for me was all about selling through wholesale, so having more of a B2B model. And that was really the first 3 years of the business. It was all that we focused on. It was our main priority. And it was working, but not at the speed that I wanted it to work at. So that was the first era of Knix, was a completely, same product, different business model entirely. Then I think you made reference to this. We had a crowdfunding campaign through Kickstarter that I did, not by choice, but because I'd run out of money and didn't have money to make this product that I really wanted to make. And that was a huge breakthrough for us because we sold more in 30 days than I had the first 3 years of the business combined. And I really saw that these were products that people wanted to buy online. And so then, very humbling moment in my journey as a founder, I made the difficult decision that I had gotten the first 3 years completely wrong, and that we were going to start over as a direct-to-consumer brand. So we cut our revenue. We cut 80% of our revenue and really started back at kind of ground zero. But that was by far the best decision I ever made. And it's also a decision that every single person around me told me not to make, because it felt pretty wild.
That's a big pivot. That is a big pivot.
It's a really big pivot, but I think that in the early days and even now still, there's only so many things you can do well. And when I've seen us get stuck, it's when we're trying to do too many things and not doing any of them particularly well.
Well, what I hear is that part of what gave you the push was the impact you wanted to have. It was like maybe you were building a nice little business B2B, but that wasn't your objective. And you were willing to reset if you could have the impact. Is that fair?
Absolutely. I wanted to communicate directly with the customers. We had no power over our wholesale partners because we were so small. They were not really, they weren't taking the same approach to size inclusivity that we were. They weren't carrying our products in the full sizes. Customers were having a negative experience by association. And so again, I think sometimes the customer just says to you, the way you're doing it this way isn't working for me and I want something else. And so that was sort of where that pivot came from. And then, we rode that same wave for multiple years until we started opening stores again. And that was in 2019. And then we went into the kind of omni-channel scaling wave, which is what we're in now. Yeah.
Anne has a question a little bit about, as you're doing all these transitions, what were some of the key gaps in your leadership team? And maybe also would ask, what kind of profiles are you looking for now for those who might be intrigued by this story and the values?
Yeah. So, I mean, you really need different people. And that is what I think the challenge is that in the beginning, you need a couple of really strong generalists. So that's the moment when, fresh out of MBA, have a little bit of knowledge in everything, ready, hungry, let's do this, is the kind of profile that you need. And someone who can kind of do a bunch of different things. So I was fortunate. I found another person like that when we were first scaling the D2C side of the business. And we just divided. They took on finance, operations, and digital marketing, which is, very, very rooted in analytics. And I took on product, brand marketing, HR, and some of the other pieces. So then, what I think lots of people don't understand is when a company is growing like this, if you're a team member, your growth has to be outpacing the growth of the company. And that is really hard because every day your job is bigger than it was before. And sometimes, you start the year and you're managing a $20 million business, and you end the year and you're managing an $80 million business. And have you grown enough over those 12 months to be capable of that? So then that's where you start getting into or I did at least, started looking for more subject matter experts. And it took me probably 2 to 3 tries in every role to find the right fit. And that's because it's very hard to find executives who also want to build. They're two completely different things. There are executives who are great at managing and who are great at leading, but can they actually, put together the process themselves, connect all the dots, like really go from, strategy to execution and break
to like operate a successful HR function. It's another to build an HR function.
Yes. So I feel like within each of those roles, I've spent, the painful 6 months being like, okay, strategy is great. What's happening? It's go time. Can we do something? Anything? And then it's fascinating because what ends up happening is that I then end up taking on a different role where for people who are far more experienced than me because they don't know how to build, I'm like, okay, let's start with one step. Which step do we want to start with? But it's so different. It's such a different way of thinking. And so now I think we're still at that moment. I mean, every exec that I interview, I spend like a solid hour trying to convince them to not take the job. Yeah. Like just being like, do you really understand what it's like? Tell me what you think it's like. Tell me what resources you think you're going to have. Okay. You won't have that.
We don't have time to go really deep on this one, but as you think, if I understand right, you're thinking more about global expansion. So how do you think about the talent necessary to do that and some of the challenges, because the storytelling is going to be a bit different, I imagine, in different cultures.
It will. And I think, we recently reset our whole organization and really thought strategically about branding each of the teams. And so when you ask about, who am I hiring? We're hiring a new COO who we say is powering the Knix engine, who's really thinking about, okay, what is needed from a technology infrastructure, supply chain standpoint to really be able to deliver to all of these different geographies, channels, customer profiles. And so that's something that we're really looking for. And then getting localized help as well. I think there is no marketer strong enough that can understand the nuances of every single culture. And I learned that at INSEAD. Like there's just subtle differences or major differences in how things are communicated.
In your category, there's going to be a lot of cultural elements.
Yes. I had an interesting conversation last week about the Middle East, and it's like it's come so far in terms of women's rights and what's happening, but are they ready to talk openly about some of the topics that we tackle? Absolutely not, so, lead with beautiful products, lead with, great photography, but don't be as forward facing on the messaging. So I think there's nuances there. From a leadership standpoint for myself, I always say like the one thing that's had to keep up with Knix's growth is me. And I didn't know that was going to be the case. And I didn't know how hard that was going to be. And I think I've been lucky, and we're almost, in many ways, I think we're more ruthless with female leaders than we are with men. We really pick them apart. Like someone's ambitious as a man and they're aggressive as a woman, or they're all these different things. And so I've done a lot of work personally on, how do I show up in the way that I want to show up? How do I get my head in the right place, believe in myself, believe in what's possible? And that's something that I wish more people had told me was so crucially important.
Well, impressive. And impressive that you're also shifting your leadership into this very new context that shows, a real openness to personal growth, I imagine. We're running low on time, so maybe start to wrap up. Maybe just before we do the final question, just on your experience at INSEAD. So I guess it influenced a little bit. You already explained how it gave you a push for the journey. Maybe did it help you with the journey over the years?
Yeah, it did. I mean, it's so interesting because when you're in your own industry, there's always a little bit of competitiveness that exists amongst your peer set. And going to INSEAD and working on this idea, and let me tell you, no one had this idea. I'm also working on that product, and I have this, like, it was so different from what everyone else was doing. It was really, honestly, the first time in my life where I just felt candidly like love, support, and enthusiasm from so many people who were rooting for me to win. And when your self-confidence is still being developed, that those early believers are incredibly important. And as you're, putting together all the pieces of building a company, especially one that involves manufacturing overseas, I felt very lucky after the fact. If I was having a low day and I found myself in, Korea or Hong Kong on a manufacturing trip, I always had a couch to sleep on, and I always had someone to remind me of how proud they were of me for going for it and that they believed that I could do it. And so I think there was this willingness to just try, and this honestly optimism. I think that a lot of the folks and my friends from INSEAD, we really believe that the world is more united than others think. We believe that the world can be a better place. We believe that we can have an impact, not just within our own communities, but in a broader sense. And it was so refreshing for me to be surrounded by a group of people that had that level of sort of hope and enthusiasm for what's next. And I think it rubbed off on me a bit.
Right. Great closing messages. Maybe just the last one for, say, current students sitting where you were sitting, who are thinking about going on an entrepreneurial journey in 2023, 24. Any initial advice? You've already given some, but any additional pieces you want to pass on?
I think that honestly, mindset is everything. And so if I were to give someone a tactical piece of advice, it wouldn't be, read this book or do this thing. It would be put in the time and energy to figure out what gives you mental strength and clarity and what helps you kind of bounce back. Because the setbacks are inevitable, and there's no advice I could give someone that would avoid the setbacks. And so it's really all about how do you kind of invest in yourself and in your own resiliency, so that when those setbacks come up, you learn from them, you grow from them, and you don't let them hold you back. So that would be my main piece of advice.
Joanna, we're out of time. So just thank you, as always, for your openness, your availability, sharing, giving back, and fabulous story and fabulous perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening.